It's a classic symbol of rural America.
Windmills are really what helped for Western expansion. Many parts of the West would not have been able to have been settled without windmills.
And more than 1,000 of our country's windmills came from Nebraska City.
A lot of other windmill companies, they were maybe only in business for a few years, whereas this one was 112 years they were producing windmills.
A factory frozen in time to teach visitors about hard work, innovation, and industrial history.
You're just not looking at photographs or seeing on a video, but you get to experience it for yourself.
The sound of nature, peaceful, calm. To families settling in Nebraska in the 1800s, this was also the sound of security. A windmill meant water, and if you lived anywhere near Nebraska City, there was only one place to go.
The Kregel Windmill Company was founded on August 19th, 1879 by two cousins, George Kregel and Louis Kregel. They had a factory where the City Hall in Nebraska City stands today.
One step inside and you are transported back to a time when windmills were lifelines for farmers and their loved ones. For many of them, the Kregels became a household name.
George and Louis would have been building wooden windmills and any number of things, wagons, buggies, plows.
This was a tough time, world wars, the Great Depression, but the Kregels stayed in business through it all, something David Flatt, executive director of the Kregel Windmill Factory Museum, credits to the Kregels themselves.
Louis Kregel had the patent to the sectional style windmills. He had two different patents for sectional windmills. So on the ones that they built, both patent dates will appear on that windmill. Louis had 20 different patents by the time he was 44 years old.
The Kregels were masters of ingenuity, not only creating products, but making their own equipment.
You didn't buy, at the time, a fully assembled saw. You bought the pieces to make a saw, and then you built the entire wood structure around it. And what George essentially built is what's fairly standard in big carpentry shops now, which is a floating table saw.
Using that same vision and innovation, the Kregels created what would become their legacy, the Eli windmill.
And then the name Eli would come from a Lutheran pastor who worked here in Nebraska City and also in Omaha. His name was Eli Huber, and he was a mentor to George Kregel. And so George named the metal windmills after him.
The Kregels knew they had something special, but they didn't have TV or Facebook back then to spread the word.
This would actually be an early version of a printer that they would have used. The Kregels did make their own brochure that they would send out to farmers. See, this goes along with their slogan, simplest and best made mill.
As their reputation grew, so did their business.
So they produced about 1,000 metal windmills here. There's about 100 of them left standing. Most of them you'll find within 50-mile radius of Nebraska City area.
1,000 windmills, all handcrafted by the Kregel team.
It took about a week to build a windmill from the time that they started to build it here to the time that they had it put together at the farmer's site.
So this entire thing is running all day long, and you turn on each individual piece of machinery as you need it.
Dean Schisler is the assistant director of the museum, showing visitors how the small crew here made such a big impact.
After the late 1880s, steel windmills used a curved blade to capture more wind, and they were much more efficient. So once they were all cut to shape on the foot shear and things over here, each individual blade would have to be put through this roller, which gives it a curve, and then trimmed to size. So they would trim it into a sort of a trapezoidal shape, and then it goes through the crimper. And what that crimper does is puts this little bend, just grab it, puts this bend on the end of the blade, and it strengthens the tip of the blades. If it was just straight, it's a lot easier to bend than when you put that crimp in there.
The men who worked here were fearless, dedicated, and talented.
They each were metal workers, woodworkers, blacksmiths. But also that same crew would go out and build or put together the windmill on site, and they'd also go back and do the maintenance. So it would have been very cold here in the wintertime, and it would have been hot when you would be working here in the summertime. So this was very hard work, and you had to really know what you're doing here.
Ella Kregel manned the office, talking to farmers through the front window so they wouldn't track mud inside. Her father, George, stayed here until his death, when his son, Art Kregel, took over. He produced the company's last windmill in 1983 and kept the business running for years after.
In 1991, Art Kregel was working here on a Friday, and he had intended to come back on the Monday. Well, he had hit a stroke over the weekend, so he was never able to come back. So that's why here you still see a lot of the things the way that they would have looked the day that he walked out.
A note and used pencil left on his desk, the safe open, Art Kregel's jacket still hanging in his office. Without any children, no one remained to carry on the family business. So this community family turned the factory into a museum.
A lot of people are pleasantly surprised when they come in here because they get to see things that, especially for some of the older guests that we have, they see things that remind them of something that they have seen when they were a child.
All of the parts, tools, and inventions used for more than a century are here. Meticulous records of every sale, every customer, every windmill.
So it is considered to be one of the most complete collections in the state of Nebraska for business records. They average 2 pages a day for 112 years.
And dotting the landscape here and on farms for miles, timeless reminders of the Kregel's contribution to history.
It's the same design they stuck with for 112 years of being in business here in town.